Hey friends, it's Sarah Rittendale. When I decided to act against all the toxic thoughts and feelings I was living with daily and try to become my best self, I quickly fell into the very common trap of perfectionism. So, I decided to create a space where wellness doesn't mean being flawless. Becoming the best version of yourself doesn't just come from conversations about managing your mean mind, learning confidence, and always doing the things that you're supposed to do. Here, we talk about how normal your toxic feelings and thoughts are, that you're not doing something wrong because you don't always feel, think, or act how you envision your best self to, how to implement self-improvement strategies in a realistic way, and we do this through a variety of topics that often prompt our best selves to crave emergence. My mission? Inspire you to recognize that you don't have to be perfect to consider yourself whole, healthy, and well. This is the Wellish podcast. Hello, my friends. Welcome back to Wellish, the podcast where we explore self-improvement without the pressure of perfection. As we are stepping into the new year, we're about a weekish in now. Many of us are buzzing with these goals and resolutions, but I want to get real honest with ourselves. By February, so many of those goals and intentions fizzle out. It happens every single time. And why? Because discomfort shows up, and most of us aren't prepared to face that discomfort. Today, I'm joined by Terry Tucker, a former SWAT hostage negotiator, motivational speaker, and cancer survivor who knows more than most about handling discomfort. Together, we'll uncover how to push through, but more importantly, when to continue to push yourself through when discomfort feels overwhelming, and when it's time to pause, reassess, and readjust. If you're someone who wants to grow without striving for unattainable perfection, make sure to subscribe to Wellish so you never miss an episode packed with real, relatable strategies for self-improvement. Let's dive into this powerful, exciting conversation. Today, we're talking to a super cool guest. We're talking about embracing discomfort. He is a former SWAT team hostage negotiator and motivational speaker. He's the author of Sustainable Excellence, 10 Principles to Leading Your Uncommon and Extraordinary Life, and survivor of a rare form of cancer. Terry Tucker, thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to have you on today.
Well, Sarah, thanks for having me on. I'm really looking forward to talking with you.
Yes, me too. So I would love to start by talking about what you bring to the conversation. Tell me about you, what you do, all of that good stuff.
Sure. So, I mean, I'm not going to go back to in womb, so to speak, but I will say,
Perfect.
yeah, I grew up on the south side of Chicago. I'm the oldest of three boys. You can't tell this from looking at me or from my voice, but I'm 6'8" tall, and actually went to college on a basketball scholarship, despite having 3 knee surgeries in high school. When I graduated from college, I moved home to find a job. I'm really going to date myself now, but this was long before the internet was available to help people find employment. I was fortunate to find that first job in the corporate headquarters of Wendy's International, the hamburger chain, in their marketing department. That was the good news. The bad news was I lived with my parents for the next 3.5 years as I helped my mother care for my father and my grandmother, who were both dying of different forms of cancer. After Wendy's, I actually went to work for the hospital that cared for my father and my grandmother. And then at 37, made that major pivot in my life and became a police officer. And as you mentioned, I was a SWAT hostage negotiator during my law enforcement career. After that, I started a school security consulting business, coached girls' high school basketball when we lived in Texas. But as you mentioned, for the last 12, almost 13 years now, I've been battling a rare form of cancer. And then I guess just finally, my wife and I have been married for 31 years. We have one child, a daughter, who's a graduate of the United States Air Force Academy and is an officer in the new branch of the military, the Space Force.
Incredible. So is that how you got into writing a book and about this embracing discomfort, was just based off of all of your experience?
Yeah, I mean, it really, I was, we were talking, before we jumped on about how you had this passion for journalism. I enjoyed writing, but I never expected to write a book, never really wanted to write a book. And enough people, I think, were put in my path that started making the same suggestion. Oh, Terry, you should write a book. Terry, you should write a book. Terry, you should write a book. So I thought, okay, what am I gonna write about? What is germane to me? What is important to me? What is something that I can offer to other people that they could get something out of? And the book is called Sustainable Excellence, and it's really born out of two conversations I had. One was with a former player that I had coached in high school who'd moved to the area in Colorado with her fiance, where my wife and I live. And the four of us had dinner one night. And I remember saying to her after dinner that I was really excited that she was living close and I could watch her find and live her purpose.
Hmm.
And Sarah, she got real quiet for a while. And then she looked at me and she was like, well, coach, what do you think my purpose is? I said, I
The
have
age-old
absolutely
question.
no idea what your purpose is, but that's what your life should be about. Finding the reason you were put on the face of this earth. And there is a reason, using your unique gifts and talents and living that reason. So that was one conversation. And then the last one was I had a young man reach out to me on social media and he said, what do you think are the most important things I should learn, not to just be successful in my job or in business, but to be successful in life? And I didn't want to give him the, get up early, work hard, help. I didn't want to give him the sort of the
Right.
cliches that we already know. And so I spent some time taking some notes and eventually I had these 10 thoughts, these 10 ideas, these 10 principles. So I sent them to him. And then I stepped back and I was like, well, I got a life story that fits underneath that principle, or I know somebody whose life emulates this principle. So literally, part of my cancer experience, I had my left leg amputated during the COVID pandemic. And while I was healing during that 4 or 5 month period, I sat down at the computer every day and I built stories, and they're real stories about real people underneath each of the principles. And
Wow.
that's how the book came to be.
That's incredible. And I like that idea too, because it sounds like you've got actionable advice in there. It's not like you're saying just like the things that we all already know, the cliche terms that you end up having to figure out long term, but things that people can actually utilize to make this change in their life. So that's super exciting to hear more about that.
Yeah, I mean, they are. I just didn't, I mean, I'm one person. My perspective is my perspective. It's
Yeah,
different from
amen.
everybody else's perspective. So find something that people can get on board with. And I'll give you, one of the principles is, and I've done this in my life. And like I said, and like you said, I put things in there that are not necessarily make me look like, the best person in the world. And this is a principle that I've done in my life and I'm not proud of it. And the principle is this: most people think with their fears and their insecurities instead of using their minds. And I know I've done that in my life. I know I wanted to get involved in a project or a business, and you kind of pull back and you're like, oh, wait a minute. Maybe I'm not smart enough, or maybe I don't have enough,
Yeah.
or what will people say about me if I fail? That's thinking with our fears and our insecurities. That's not thinking with our minds.
Yes. And I love how you word that you are definitely thinking with your fear and insecurity. It's not your clear headed mind that actually approaches these situations. It's the fear. That's
Absolutely.
cool. Okay. So that kind of leads us into the major theme of embracing discomfort. So I would love to talk about what that means. What is your perspective on what discomfort is and how it shows up in our daily lives and how we have to repair it in our daily lives. So how do you personally define discomfort and why do you think people are so quick to avoid it?
Because it hurts.
Mhm.
Because it's our mammalian brain telling us, don't do that. That
Yeah.
hurts. That's uncomfortable. But we all know this. I mean, it's not like I've ever reinvented the wheel or anything here. We know that the only way we're going to grow, the only way we're going to improve, the only way we're going to get better is if we step outside those comfort zones and we do things that make us uncomfortable. I used to constantly remind my players, and they would tell you this if you talk to them. I used to tell them all the time, you need to get comfortable being uncomfortable.
Mm.
And so we would always change up practice. We would always do things differently and things like that because I didn't want them to get complacent. I didn't want them, oh, we've done that drill a million times. This isn't hard for me. No, we're going to do different types of drills or different variations of drills because I don't want you to be complacent, because in the game, things are going to be constantly changing and things you haven't seen. So I want to make sure that the practices are harder than the games are for you. So
Mhm.
that's how I would structure my practices so that the game's like, wow, this was easy, coach. Like, yeah, it should have been. You worked really hard in practice.
Yeah.
You were doing things that made you.
Right. Okay. So what is it like? And if you could define what discomfort looks like, because I think that when we think of discomfort, it can be at so many different levels. And I think we don't know necessarily what is like the good discomfort zone to be in compared to, pushing yourself so hard that maybe you're on the verge of burnout, but you think I just have to work hard and live in discomfort and be okay with this because that's what's going to get me to an end result, when obviously we know that that's not the truth. It ends up burning you out and you don't get as far as maybe you could have if you were nicer to yourself. So what does that comfort zone look like? Discomfort
Yeah,
zone.
and you're absolutely right. I mean, we can even take a good thing and beat it into the ground so that
Hmm.
it's not a good thing and it's not good for us. I guess I would just define discomfort as something that hurts, but that also allows you to grow, that allows you to get better, that allows you to improve in some way, with the understanding that, you know what? Yeah, you can hit it hard. You have to love the grind. If you're going to be good at anything, you have to love the grind of what it takes to get there. But at the same time, you also need downtime. You also need, time to play on your computer and look at stupid TikTok videos if that's what kind of,
Right.
put your mind, not like I got to go, go, go. No, you need vacation time. You need time away. You need time to relax in addition. And it's kind of like everything else in life. Life is if you have a successful life, you have a balance. You have a balance
Mhm.
between whatever is important to you. For me, I call it my 3 F's. It's faith, family, and friends. I need to have a balance between
I
all
like
those.
that.
And if I don't have that balance, we're out of balance. It's kind of like having a three-legged stool. And I always talk about motivation, discipline, and good habits. If you have motivation and discipline, but don't have good habits, you're off balance in life. If you have great habits and discipline, but not the motivation to put them into practice, your life is out of balance. So it's really, what do you do to balance your life with the things you want to do and you love the grind, but also that downtime to take care of yourself?
Okay, I love that. And I love the 3 F's because I love that it gives almost like a mantra, something for you to latch onto so that when you do feel yourself starting to dip into that almost toxic level, that you can say, okay, am I caring for my 3 F's? Does this fall into this category? And when it does start to, you realize, be maybe more hyperfixation or you're just beating yourself up, being too hard on yourself, you can reassess, readjust, and try to get to your goal in a different way. So I like that.
Yeah. I mean, if you don't mind me just adding to that for
Yeah, of
just,
course, please.
I mean, one of the things that as a coach, coaching players, if I screamed at everybody when they made a mistake, that might work for the players that, screaming at me is going to is going to motivate me. But there are some players, and that's where the nuance of coaching is. There are some players you don't need to say a word to them. They're going to be
Yeah.
so much harder on themselves than you're ever going to be on them. There are other players that all you need to do is look at them and they know that it's like, yeah, I kind of messed that up, didn't I? I don't need to
Mhm.
say a word to you. So it's finding that what works for you, and especially when you're in a leadership position, what works for other people. There are some people you need to yell at them, and that's what motivates them. But there are
Yeah.
other people, if you yell at them, they'll just shut down, and there's absolutely no way they're gonna be better or they're gonna improve. That's the nuance of leadership. That's the nuance of coaching.
Absolutely. That makes sense. I think too that that's that we get more into that embracing of the discomfort with that almost building like a discomfort muscle. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, a lot of it is, the coach is the boss and we do what we say. But you're not going to learn a better way to handle coaching with that difficulty, that uncomfortableness, is say, okay, I know you just made a mistake. I'm not going to tell you that you made that mistake. I'm going to ask you why, or what made you do what you did. Because by me yelling at you, or me just looking at you, or doing whatever, so a coach told me I made a mistake. Okay, but you're not going to learn from that. You need to
Right.
learn by, well, here's what I saw, coach, and here's why I did what I did. Oh, okay, good. I
Mhm.
didn't see that from where I was. That was a different perspective. And again, a different perspective on life, a different perspective on a particular game. I didn't see that perspective. Okay, what could you have done differently? Now you're teaching as much as you are saying, hey, you made a mistake. We all make mistakes. But if we don't
Right.
learn from those mistakes, they're missed opportunities to make us better human beings.
Right. And I love the perspective because that is so true that like if it's allowing him to evaluate your player, to evaluate his own perspective instead of just making a change in behavior based off of fear. Oh,
Right.
I don't want coach to yell at me. I'm afraid of the consequences of this. And that goes back to your original point of making decisions and taking action based off fear and insecurity, is that you're making decisions and acting in that light compared to, actually taking the time to self-reflect and learn from what happened. So that makes sense. I like that a lot. I want to know, what are some small actionable steps listeners can take today to start embracing discomfort?
Yeah, and I'll give you what I do every day. And this is going to sound so simple. And I think so much of life we make really difficult just because, we overthink it and things like that. Here's what I'd recommend. And I do this every day in my life. Do one thing every day that scares you, that makes you nervous, that makes you uncomfortable, that's potentially embarrassing. It doesn't have to be a big thing. But if you do those small things every day, when the big disasters in life hit us, and they hit all of us, we lose somebody who's close to us, we unexpectedly get let go from our jobs, we find out we have a chronic or a terminal illness, you will be so much more resilient to handle those things than those people who never step outside their comfort zones, who never do anything that's uncomfortable. And so what am I talking about? I mean, one of the things I do is when I take a shower at night, at the end of the shower, I turn the water to as cold as it possibly can, and I do that cold water therapy. Now, the science is still, I think, kind of out on how much benefit we get from that. There is some science that says it might help your immune system. But for me, I'm still battling cancer. So every 3 weeks, I'm at the hospital for an entire week getting a drug that kind of kicks my butt. So by doing this, it's uncomfortable. I mean, it's not horrible, but it's uncomfortable. And it allows me to do those uncomfortable things when I do my drug therapy for my cancer. I hate going to the dentist. The other day, I picked up the phone, made my 6-month appointment to go to the dentist. People are like, oh, that's not a big deal. When you hate the dentist as much as I do, yeah, it is a big deal. So what I'm talking about is not some grandiose, some big thing you got to do every day. What's one thing? Every day, get up in the morning, make your bed. That's one win you will get out of the day. Get up at the same time every day. Journal. I mean, you were talking about, you're a journalism major. You know what? Journal every day. Have a writing practice in your life. Oh, that's uncomfortable. How am I going to carve out 10, 15 minutes to have a writing practice? You can't carve out 15 minutes. You don't waste 15 minutes in your day where you could do something.
Scrolling. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Where you could do something that you would enjoy and that would benefit your life.
No, 100%. And I think that the idea of doing something uncomfortable every day is something that's talked about a lot, but I love that you talk about just these real life situations, these real life examples to apply them to, because they're so simple. Like how it does feel uncomfortable to when you're just lazy and it's Saturday and you don't want to do anything, or when you're running late to work to make your bed quick, or, maybe even waking up when your alarm goes off, like actually physically pulling yourself out of bed. That's uncomfortable when you do just want to lay there and veg and not worry about it. And so I think when I used to hear people say that all the time, I always thought that it meant like doing some big, grandiose, uncomfortable situation. And it doesn't have to be like that. So I think that, obviously that's really helpful to hear that.
Yeah. We talk about the alarm going off. I was reading an article the other day that said 1/3 of Americans admit to hitting the snooze button on their alarm at least 3 times every morning. Think about that.
Yeah. Right.
3 times. I mean, it's not like you just hit the snooze button once. That 3 times. Usually it's a 15-minute cycle. That's 45 minutes. And again, if you need to sleep in, sleep in. I'm not telling you not to do that, but at the same time, if you could use that in some way that you would enjoy or that it would benefit you, then you've lost 45 minutes out of your day.
Right.
And, I mean, I'm old enough now and have been battling this cancer thing. Death is kind of one of those things, and we don't talk about death, especially in the West. But I think death should be one of those things that's always kind of in your peripheral. It's out here. You're not focused on it, but you know it's there. I love the old Stoic philosophy, memento mori, which was a Latin phrase that meant remember death. Remember that you're going to die, not for the sake of death, but for the sake of really living your life.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's was it Bill Gates maybe? I don't know. Somebody says like a speech that they talk about that exact thing, that live every single day like it's your last day, and live every single day like you've already like thinking back on your life, because the dots always connect when you look back at everything. So being
Absolutely.
able to have that, I think that is a really good way to go about it. And just being able to reframe challenges as opportunities, I think, is like the mentality there. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, it's really, do I get to or do I have to? Do I
Yeah.
get to get up this morning and go to work and make money and be with people that I care about? Or do I have to get up and go to work and be with people that maybe I don't like? I
Mhm.
mean, do I get to get up this morning and get the kids ready for school and put them in the car? Or do I get to get the kids up and put them in the car and have that 30-minute drive to school where we can talk about whatever's bugging them or whatever they're thinking about or
Mhm.
whatever we want to laugh about? It's, do we get to or do we have to? Which handle do you want to grab?
Yes, right. And that's like I heard on like the same exact thing. Do you get to do you have to pay your rent or mortgage? That sucks, but you're paying for safe space. You're paying for a warm space for you to live and sleep and exist. So it's same thing. You get to do that. And I kind of like that mentality, to think about silencing that inner critic, silencing that voice in our head that is telling us that things are uncomfortable, telling us and like being just like, this is wrong. Everything is wrong. You need to fix this. This is bad. You're uncomfortable. And being able to have those mindset shifts and reframing those messages to yourself.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. It's just how you frame it. And that's
Mhm.
your choice. Yeah, I can't do it for you. You can't do it for somebody else. It's your choice. How do you want to attack this day? Or how do you want to live this day for you? Do I
Yeah.
have to or do I get to? It's all up to you. I can't do anything that'll make you change that perspective.
How do you coach people to start to reframe?
I mean, part of it is, and I don't think we know this, and I'm trying to remember the research behind it, and I can't remember where I heard this, but it was some ridiculously large figure of how many people don't know their values. What do you
Mm.
value in your life? And again, I'll go back to my three F's: faith, family, and friends. Those are things that I value in life. And values I look at kind of as I guess, a foundation, a bedrock, something that grounds you, and it's not going to change. It's
Mhm.
immovable. You know what's important in your life, and once you know your values, you can kind of hook yourself onto those and explore, and kind of like being tethered to a spacecraft when you're doing a spacewalk or something like that. It's, I've got something that's there that's not going to move, and so I can go out and I can do these things. I can take chances. There's a guy by the name of Jeff Wetzler, and I know I've done this, and you may have done this in your life. We make these arbitrary deadlines. We say, by the time I'm 28 years old, I want to be making $100,000 a year. Or by the
Yeah,
time I'm
totally.
32 years old, I need to be married and have a kid or something like that. So we make
Mhm.
these arbitrary deadlines. And Wetzler talks about looking at life differently. He said, look at your life in terms of decades. So in your 20s, do everything. Get out there, explore, make all kinds of mistakes and blunders, not for the sake of making those mistakes, but for what you learn from those things. And then in your 30s, find those two or three or four things that really grab your heart. Maybe it's starting a family, maybe it's starting a bit, whatever it ends up being, and focus on those three or four things. And he says, then in your 40s, when you're more established, you've got more experience, your prefrontal cortex has come together and all that stuff, find that one thing and dig into it. And then he says, in your 50s, your 60s, and beyond, you can reap the rewards of living that life, of living your life in your decade. So you're not, oh, I'm 28 and I'm not making $100,000 a year. There's something wrong with me. There's nothing wrong with you. I'm 32 years old. I'm not in a committed relationship. I don't have a family. There's nothing wrong with that. we all have our own timeline that we're on. And by putting those arbitrary mileposts out there, all you do is frustrate yourself when you don't get to that point. Look at your life in decades and see how that, I think, expands you and grows you as a human being.
Yeah, that made me take a deep breath. I felt that relaxation when you explained that, because it is so true, and we do put these time markers on things and feel like a failure when we don't meet those time markers. And what a more peaceful and enjoyable way to live life if you think of it that way, because then you do get to your 50s and 60s when you've spent all of this time guilt shaming and thinking that you suck because you didn't meet these certain timelines, and now you're not reaping any reward, but looking back on life feeling guilty about everything you missed out on because you're living so much in your head.
Yeah.
When if you just take the time to embrace what's happening and work with it, and know that you can handle it, you know that you're capable, and trust yourself to handle anything that comes up for you, that it'll work out. So that's really cool. It kind of reminds me of building resilience. How does that play a role in embracing discomfort?
Yeah, I mean, resilience comes by doing hard things. You get to a point where it's like, yeah, this is hard. Yeah, this is difficult. Yeah, it hurts. It's uncomfortable and things like that. But resilience is really more I think the understanding that no matter what life throws at me, I can handle it.
Yeah.
I may not be perfect at it. It may take me a while to figure it out and overcome and things like that. But there's nothing in life that's going to beat me. There's nothing in life that is like, yeah, okay, that's hard. I didn't expect that. I didn't want that, but I can handle it.
Right.
And so many people cave. I mean, especially today. I mean, Sarah, I'm old enough to remember, nobody was ever triggered when I was in school.
Yeah, totally.
Nobody
Absolutely.
was ever triggered. There was no,
and other people weren't responsible for other people's triggers.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I didn't need an emotional support dog to take my final exams in high school.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, it's like whatever happened to you, as you say, maybe it sucked, but you know what? You had to embrace the suck.
Yeah.
And you were going to take that, and you were still going to do what you needed to do. You were still going to do what your family needed you to do, or you needed to do for your classes, or whatever that ended up being in life. There was no, oh, I'm triggered, so I can't possibly do this. It's like nobody cares that you were triggered. And it's not that they don't care about you. It's just that they care about themselves more. They care about their issues, their family, their things in life that are going on. It's like I said, it's not that they don't care about you. It's just that there are other things more important. So if you're ever waiting for somebody to come to your rescue, it's never going to happen. Right. Carol Lawson is the women's basketball coach at Duke University. And you can go Google this. It's on YouTube. She has this great speech, and it's kind of an impromptu, sort of off the cuff thing that she's talking about to her players about. That said, she's like, well, you're sitting here saying, well, when finals are over, things will get easier. Or you know what? Once this really hard practice is over, life is going to get easier, or whatever. And her point is, life never gets easier. You just handle hard better. And that's what resilience is. That's handling hard better is probably the best definition of resilience.
Absolutely it is. That is so good. That's what I've actually just been listening about resilience and learning about resilience a little bit more. And I used to know resilience as that, how quick can you bounce back? How quick can you get up after something happens? And now I feel I understand resilience a little bit more to be how exactly what you're saying. Just like how you add what's like sucky thing has happened into your life and how you move forward from that, how you handle the bad thing that's happened and move forward compared to, you're never going to go backwards. You're never going to go back to before when the shitty thing happened. It's going to be, you're always going to have to move forward and learn how to deal with it and learn how to navigate life now that that's a part of your path. So it's good.
But, and that's an important part you make. I think a lot of us think, and I did at certain times in my life, that life was linear. Like we started at A and there was this trajectory that we just, we got to Z. Mm-hmm. Life's not linear, no. I learned this from playing basketball. You would work really hard and you would get better. So you're starting to climb, but then you would plateau. And even when you worked really hard, sometimes you get worse. You know, and then you'd plateau again, but then you'd work hard and you'd move up and then you
Right.
plateau. And that's how life is. It's not,
And that's so
we just get
normal.
better.
Right.
We're better, we plateau, we get worse, we plateau, we get worse, we get better, we get better. That's what life is about. It's not a linear type of living. It's more of an up, down, up, down, up, down kind of thing.
Totally. Well, and that's what, like, before we started recording it and you were asking me about why I started the podcast, like, that is exactly the reason, is that we are all taught that it is like this uphill, you constantly get better. If you do more, if you read more, if you work harder, that you'll get better, you'll do better. And that is just not true. And I love you saying it, because it just makes it more normal. It makes it so people realize that, like, what they're doing, like, they're not crazy. You're not doing anything wrong. You're not screwing yourself up. You're not a failure. You're not any of these things that your inner critic is maybe telling you that you are. It's just life. And everybody is experiencing that same thing. We're all just hoping,
Exactly.
you know, it would get better every single day, but it's just, that's how it works.
But it's not. And you know that, and I know that. And the sooner people figure that out, you know, I worked really hard today and I got worse. That's okay. Work hard again tomorrow. You know, you may get worse again, but eventually, you know, I always talk, we were talking about, you know, my book and stuff like that. And people, oh, how did you write a book? I said, I had 2 rules. Number 1 is I will write 1 page, a minimum of 1 page every day. And then the second rule was I won't touch anything. I won't edit. I won't go back. I won't take out until I feel I have a first draft. And there were days I would write absolute garbage and like, oh my God, this is terrible. It's never going to make it into a book. And then maybe the next day I'd write 2 or 3 pages and it was good. And then I'd write something that was garbage again. And so it was not I just wrote a book and it just, you know, I just page by page and then it was great.
It out. Yeah.
And then, you know, at the end it was, okay, that's out. No, that's in. That's out. No, that's in. And eventually you have a product that I was happy with, that I was comfortable with. But there were a lot of days where I wrote absolute garbage that I knew would never be in a book, but I was still writing. I was still working on the craft. And then hopefully tomorrow I'm going to write something better. But even if I didn't, it didn't stop me from wanting to write the next day as well.
Right. Well, and I like the idea of taking the small win as not having a day that you did like a good writing piece, but a day that you wrote, and that's the win. And being able, like, there's no, it's not, mental stuff isn't weight loss, or isn't like a physical thing like weight loss is what I'm trying to say, that you can step on the scale and see that the number's gone down. You have to be able to take your own inventory for it. So being able to say, okay, I wrote today, I made progress, I'm closer to the reality that I want to live in, that I've written a book. And that's something to be proud of.
It is. And I mean, James Clear, you know, who wrote Atomic Habits, which is a, you know, multi-million-dollar bestseller.
Yeah, I love that book.
He talks about it. He said, you know, most writers day by day write average to bad stuff. Not everybody writes the greatest thing every single day.
Yeah, right.
They write average stuff, or they write stuff that's really not any good. But you can still, over a course of time, learn to be a better writer just by writing, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent.
Right. And that comes back to that embracing discomfort idea, just because I think that we don't take, this is what we talked about on the podcast last week, is the perfection paralysis, that like we don't take action because we think that we have to have some level of knowledge before we can start, that it has to look exactly as we pictured in our heads before we can start. And you're not going to get anywhere. You're not putting any coins in your progress purse by waiting until you're good enough or until you've figured it out. You just have to start, and it's going to suck, and it's going to not look exactly as you picture in your head and all of the things, but just starting is what's going to get you closer to that goal, obviously, than not doing anything at all. And when you say it sounds silly, but
no, it is.
We think in our heads.
And it's, you know, it works on the small scale, but it also works on the larger scale.
Yeah.
Jesse Itzler is a part owner of the Atlanta Hawks, the National Basketball Association, and he's married to a woman by the name of Sarah Blakely. Now, Sarah Blakely started a women's undergarment company called Spanx, and it's a multi-million-dollar company. But Itzler tells this story. He's talking about his wife. He said when she started Spanx, she had 1 prototype and $5,000. She had been a fax salesperson, a door-to-door fax. We don't even use faxes anymore. For the most part, we don't use faxes anymore. But his point was she knew about selling. She didn't know about marketing. She didn't know about HR. She didn't know about manufacturing. She didn't know about distribution. And what he was saying was, if she would have waited, just like what you've been saying, if she would have waited until I knew everything about everything and then started Spanx, he said, I guarantee you somebody else would have come up with that idea and run with it. His point was, wherever you are, start. There's never going to be a better time. There's never going to be a better day. You're never going to be any younger. Start right now and figure it out as you go along. What people don't understand, it's not getting to the end of the rainbow or the top of the mountain. It's the journey to get there that really is what life is all about.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I was hoping if you could summarize one key lesson from your book that ties into embracing discomfort, what would it be?
I guess let me offer this piece of advice.
Yeah.
And this is, I think, I wish I would have said this. I don't remember where I heard this, but I think this is so important. And I look back on my life and say, boy, I wish I would have known this. And it's this. It's more important who you work with and who you work for than it is the work that you do. Find people in your life that care about you. Find people that want to invest in you. Find people that want to see you succeed and hitch your wagon to those people and climb your mountains together.
Mm, love that. That is so powerful. I like that so much. That makes a really big difference. And I like that you share too that it's something that you wish that you had known, because
Yeah.
that's always, obviously so good to hear people say stuff like that. Can you tell us a little, like a story from like what you struggled with embracing discomfort to now something that you're really good at embracing?
Sure, I'll use my cancer experience. So 2012, I'm diagnosed with this incredibly rare form of melanoma, and most people think of melanoma as too much exposure to the sun affects the melanin, the pigment in our skin. Mine is in a very rare form that appears on the bottom of the feet and the palms of the hands. It has nothing to do with sun exposure, but it's very rare and it's very deadly. And in 2012, I was told, well, you will probably be dead in 2 years. And I thought, well, you've given me a death sentence. Maybe I can turn that death sentence into a life sentence. So what is my purpose now that I have a chronic, certainly a chronic, but more than likely a terminal illness? How can I use my discomfort, my ugliness, my pain for something good, for something positive, for something that will help others? And through these last almost 13 years now that I've been alive, when I was supposed to be dead a long time ago, I've been able to say, okay, I've learned some things along the way. I don't have all the answers. I'm not perfect. You're looking at me now. There's no S on my chest. I do not have a cape and, fly around with magical powers or anything like that. But I've learned things that I can offer, or I like to offer to other people, with the idea being use those things to make your life better. And when I was diagnosed, I absolutely positively went through all the stages that we would associate with grief. First it was denial. I can't possibly have cancer. I've done everything right in my life, eat right, exercise, all that stuff. And then it was anger. I can't possibly have cancer. I've done everything right in my life. And then there was a period of sort of bargaining with God. Our daughter was in high school when I was diagnosed. I was like, come on, God, let me live long enough to see her graduate from high school. And then I absolutely got to a point where I was down. I was depressed. I felt sorry for myself. But then I came out the other end and said, this sucks, but I'm going to have to embrace the suck. I do not like the cards I've been dealt, but I'm going to have to play these cards to the best of my ability. And that's what I've been trying to do for the last 13 years.
Okay, so when you first said that you decided to change it from a death sentence to a life sentence, my initial thought, my initial question I was going to ask you is, were you always like that? Were you always able to reframe? But at the end there, how you just said that you did go through the grief stages and then come to that conclusion, I love that you say that, because I think that it really shows that you, again, like those lulls, plateaus, and highs, is that, you do go through, you who are obviously, you're so good at the mind stuff and being able to reframe and put yourself in a good mental headspace. Even you can experience that grief and changing it into that life sentence instead. So I think that That's really powerful. I'm curious, what advice would you give someone facing a discomfort they didn't choose? Because obviously that is your scenario.
It is. And I guess I'll answer that with this story. And it's a true story. It happened back in the 1950s at Johns Hopkins University. There was a professor who was doing an experiment with rats. Now, hang with me here because he's going to tell a rat story. Yeah, I'm going to tell a rat. Yeah. It's a true story though. You can read the research. It's online. He took rats and he put them in a tank of water that was over their head. And he wanted to see how long the average rat could tread water. An average rat treaded water for about 15 minutes. And just as those rats were getting ready to sink and drown, he reached in, grabbed them, pulled them out, dried them off, and let them rest for a while. And then he took those exact same rats and put them back in that exact same tank of water. And the second time around, on average, those rats treaded water for 60 hours.
What?
Exactly.
That's insane.
Now think about that. The first time, 15 minutes. It's not like, your business is going to go under, or you're going to flunk a test, or your marriage is over. You're going to die. Your life is going to be over. And the second time around, 60 hours, which taught me two things. Number one, the importance of hope in our lives. That if we know we're doing the right things, maybe not today, maybe not this month, maybe not even this year, but there's a very good chance, nothing's 100%, that if you keep doing the things you know are right, you will get to where you want to be. And the second thing it taught me was just how much more our physical bodies can handle than we ever thought they could. Now, don't get me wrong. I think we all have a breaking point, but that breaking point is so much further down the road than we ever thought it was. Our brains, and we're kind of coming full circle on the discussion. It's our brains that are saying, hey, this hurts. This is uncomfortable. Stop, knock it off. And we listen to it. It's like, okay, I'll stop. It's just like a marathon runner. And we know this. We've researched it. Marathon runners hit that wall. Oh, I just don't think I can go on. I just can't make it.
Yeah.
No, if you keep moving forward, you can push through that wall. You get that second wind and you're able to finish the marathon. That's life. That's what life is all about. When life tells you it hurts and to quit and stop, that's the time to redouble your effort and push through and see how far you can keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. That completely makes sense. And I love that example of the rats. That's
rat story.
insane.
Yes.
I totally thought that you were going to say 15 minutes. I was going to say like an hour, 60 hours.
60 hours. Insane. I mean, some of them went as long as 80 hours, but on average it was 60 hours. Yeah.
That's crazy. Okay. So what are you telling me, that I have to go through things twice in order to be okay after the bad things happen?
Your brain is a lot bigger than a rat. So you're able to say, hey, I understand what hope is about. I understand that, you know what? I know this hurts, but I can use that hurt. I can use that uncomfortableness. There's a great line that Ernest Hemingway wrote in his book, Farewell to Arms, which is kind of a semi-autobiographical account of his time as an ambulance driver during World War I. And the line is this: life breaks everyone, and afterward, many are stronger at the broken places. Mm-hmm. So just like if you were to break your arm and a doctor would set it and put it in a cast and it would heal, that area of the break would be stronger than the rest of the bone in your arm. That's just a metaphor for life. Those hard things, those difficult things, those things we don't want to happen in our lives that do happen, if we can continue to move forward, we come out the other end of those things stronger and more resilient human beings.
Absolutely. I love it. Okay, so to wrap things up, I like to play a game with my guests called Kinda Toxic, Kinda Well. So I like to play this game because it highlights the people I talk to always seem to have it all together, and it's supposed to show that not everybody has it all together. But a lot of the time, because you guys are so advanced, I'll say, you give really good feedback for when you're feeling these emotions. So if you're down to play, I just have a couple more questions for you.
I'm down for it. Let's go.
Okay, absolutely. So first one, when do you experience the resistance to discomfort?
The resistance to discomfort?
Mm-hmm. Like when can you not embrace it? When do you feel resistant to discomfort?
Oh, when I have my treatments, when I get my therapy, I had it last week and I get down, I cry. It brings my emotions right to the surface. And I feel like sometimes a blubbering idiot where I'm
Mhm.
just, I'm crying. I feel sorry for myself. This is horrible. But I also know it's going to end eventually. I mean, I've done it enough times to know this isn't permanent. This isn't something that I'm going to have to deal with. I know it's going to end. So you just embrace it. You go through it. It's kind of like the break your arm story. I mean,
Mhm.
it happens, but if I can keep going forward, eventually it'll stop and I'll be more resilient because I dealt with it. I handled it and things like that.
Mhm.
So I would say right now it's during my drug therapy.
When do you experience guilt or shame?
I guess when my wife and I have been married for 31 years. 13 of those years have been dealing with me and cancer. And I've never been in remission. There's never been, for 5 years, everything was fine. It's never
Mhm.
been fine. I've either been having, my foot was amputated, my leg was amputated. I was on a horrible drug regimen right out of the gate. And I feel horrible that, I mean, I'm not a math major, but almost half of our marriage has been putting her through this. The
Mhm.
physical pain is something I can deal with. I can deal with that. But the emotional pain that she has to deal with, that she has to wait. When I had my leg amputated, it was during COVID. I was
Mhm.
not allowed to have anyone with me. The
Mhm.
morning of my amputation, she dropped me off at the hospital. And I remember she said to me, "What am I supposed to do? I
Yeah.
can't come in with you. You're going to lose your leg. And I can't be there for you. I can't be there with you." And I said, "Just wait in the parking lot and pray. That's all I can. That's all I can." And I felt horrible having
Yeah.
to do that. I mean, yeah, I'm losing my leg, but I felt worse about what my wife was going through than I did about actually losing my leg.
Wow. You're incredible. That's a really
I'm
good.
not that incredible.
Yeah, that's really everybody strives for that, right? To have that husband. I love that. She's so lucky. What do you find yourself overthinking about?
What do I sound like? Oh, that's a great question. What am I overthinking about? I guess, sometimes I do get into that. I've got to be more productive. I know I only have a finite amount of time left on the face of this earth, given my
Sure.
disease and the stage that it's at. So I need to do more. I need to do more things, and I need to be conscious about. No, I'm just gonna go read a book. You know what? Or I'm gonna look at some goofy, like I said, goofy videos online just to decompress. It's not helping me at all, but it's
Yeah.
helping me to decompress. It's not making me a better human being, but it's making me, oh, okay, I can take a
Yeah.
breath for a minute. That's what I overthink.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. Which then makes you a better human being because you're taking the time to decompress. I
Yeah,
like that.
absolutely. Absolutely.
What do you find yourself feeling judgmental about?
It bothers the heck out of me when I see people wasting their life. Um, there's an entrepreneur by the name of Ed Milet, and he talks about the four types of people in the world. And I love the way he talks about this. He said the first group are the unmotivated. And he said that's the vast majority of people that you will encounter in your life. The second group he talks about are the motivated. He said it's kind of a carrot and stick approach to life. If I do this, I will get that. It's kind of a low level way to live, but it's a very successful way for people to have a great life and do some great things. The third group he talks about are the inspirational people. The word inspiration coming from two words, in spirit. So if you're an inspirational person, you are moving people with your energy. And then the
Mhm.
last group he talks about are the aspirational people, where people aspire to be like you. I want to be aspirational. And so when I look at people that are just like, yeah, I'm 35 years old. I'm living in my parents' basement. I really don't have a job. I'm really not looking for a job. I have nothing to do. I don't care. Woe is me. Life is horrible. The world owes me something. That drives me crazy.
Same. I totally relate to that. Totally relate to that. Last one. If you were trying to give somebody a piece of advice to be more well than toxic, what advice would you give them?
That's another great question. What would I say to them? I guess I would tell them that you're so much more powerful. I would absolutely tell them the rat story, but there's another kind of story that dovetails with that. I have a friend of mine who's a former Navy SEAL, and the SEALs talk about what they call their 40% rule. And that basically says that if you're done, if you're at the end of your rope, if you just can't go on, you're only at 40% of your maximum. And you still have another 60% left in reserve to give to yourself. So those times when you are, I'm so sick, I feel so horrible, I just can't do it. Remember that you're really only at 40% of your maximum. You still have that 60% left to give to yourself. I guess that's the advice I give.
Absolutely. I love it. Where can people find you? How can they buy your book?
Yeah, Sustainable Excellence is available anywhere you can get a book online, Amazon, BarnesandNoble.com, Apple iBooks. And I have a website/blog called Motivational Check. You can leave me a message there. That's motivationalcheck.com.
Perfect. Sounds good. Terry, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for all of your knowledge and your words. I really appreciate your time. You've
Well, Sarah,
been
thanks
so
for
great.
having me on. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, absolutely. Me too. What an incredible conversation with Terry Tucker. I loved him. I thought he provided really good advice, really great insight, and obviously is coming from a very realistic and hard place with the things that he has experienced and is experiencing in his life. He shows us that we're able to reframe and still live a life that we really enjoy while experiencing the inevitable discomforts that are going to come up in our life. As we enter this new year, I really want to encourage both you and I to take his advice to heart, that discomfort is a sign of growth and it's not a sign to quit, but being able to take a step back and assess what is happening when you begin to feel discomfort. It is supposed to hurt. It's supposed to not feel great, but it's supposed to help you grow. So if you are taking an inventory of your feelings and you're realizing that you're hurting enough that you're not growing, that you're not moving forward, that you're not helping yourself, that's when you have to reassess and readjust. But if it just is uncomfortable, keep going. You are capable of achieving it and you're doing it for your long-term result. Remind yourself of your why. And remember his tip, do one small thing every day that makes you uncomfortable. He gave very realistic, normal options like making a doctor's appointment because you haven't done that and taken care of that in a while. It's uncomfortable, but it's these small steps that build resilience and they help us handle life's challenges better. If you are someone who wants to embrace self-improvement without the stress of perfection, make sure to subscribe to Wellish so you never miss another episode. And if you enjoyed this conversation, please rate, review, and share it with a friend who could use some encouragement on their own journey. Thank you so much for listening, and I will talk to you guys next Monday. Bye.